Why do we have credit scores? Can you gift your kids $1 million without paying tax? And is renting always more expensive than buying? Let's find out.
Get to the bag.
Welcome back to the Personal Finance Club show. Hey, Jen, how's it going?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Jeremy?
Great. So on your TikTok, you just asked a very interesting question that never occurred to me. What did you ask that, and it's like, you know, I want to call it viral, but it's stirred up a little bit of controversy. What did you ask on this TikTok?
Question for white people. When you go to pick up an order from a local establishment, do they ever ask you if you are like a DoorDash or Seamless or Grubhub driver? Or if you're going to like Walmart or the grocery store, do they ever ask you if it's Instacart when you get to the front? Because this is one of those things that I feel like it's like being followed in a store and you can't prove it's racist, but you know they're following you because you're black. I'm wondering, because I'm like, do y'all get asked? Because I'm like, why? What is it about me that made you assume? No shade to a delivery driver, but why am I being asked if this is for me or for another customer? Like, why couldn't I be picking up a little green smoothie at 10 a.m.? What? I can't have a smoothie? I don't understand. I just want to try and enjoy my little drink. Yeah, viral in like my normal TikTok when I post music, it's 4.5 views, and this one got like thousands. I went to a local smoothie shop in my neighborhood to pick up a smoothie yesterday morning because I needed to go grocery shopping and I hadn't, and I was seamlessing / DoorDashing instead. And I walked in and I said, I'm picking up an order for Jen. And they said, are you DoorDash or are you whatever? And I said, no, this is for me. And I was curious because I don't know if white people are asked that same thing when they walk into an establishment. And so I made a video and I asked, does anybody have this experience? And thousands of white people said, I've never been asked that before.
I didn't even know anyone was asked that. I've seen, you know, DoorDashers in restaurants and grocery stores, whatever, and I just thought they announced themselves or the restaurants didn't care who was who. And so, yeah, as a white person, I was for sure I was like, oh no one ever asked me that. And so, yeah, but now now the question is like, is this an unconscious bias of these restaurants? And so I guess to be clear, you are not a DoorDasher, right?
I'm not a DoorDasher, and this is I was telling Jeremy earlier, this is probably the 4th time this has happened to me, and it's happened to me in grocery stores, at other like restaurants. So this was the first time I was like, man, this feels like a pattern. Yeah. Let me ask if anybody else has this experience. And I did say earlier that I had my phone in my hand, but it's 2025. We all always have a phone.
You're in LA with a phone in your hand.
Exactly. And then I had started asking myself questions about what I was wearing. But once again, we're in LA. We're all wearing athleisure. I was wearing like a black sweater. Like there's no DoorDash uniform. You just go out in what you're wearing, and there's no LA uniform, right?
Right.
So I just started to think, is this a thing that happens to other people? And thousands of comments said no.
And I'm curious if it happens to other black people though, because like, you know, or is it something about you specifically? And you said, you know, I'm picking up an order for Jen. You kind of refer to yourself in the third person there.
Yeah.
Like, but obviously you have to, because they don't know what your name is. Like, I'm picking up an order for me, Jen.
Right.
No one says that, right?
Right.
So yeah, it sounds, and I do think that it's probably not something malicious being done by the restaurants, and not like, ooh, I'm going to accuse this girl of being a DoorDasher when she's not. But I think,
prefaced in the video, there's nothing wrong with being a DoorDasher, but I just wonder if it's something that's made, an assumption that's made that wouldn't necessarily be made with other races or genders or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I don't know.
So if you're out there and you own an establishment, check yourself.
And if it's happened to you, hit us up with your story. Maybe we can include a follow-up in a future episode.
Okay, so let's get into our first segment. Explain it like I'm 5. The day this episode comes out will be the day before Halloween, so I picked a spooky topic. What is a credit score, and does it matter?
Ooh, spooky credit scores, debt. I think I can explain this one like I'm 5.
Okay.
because not like I'm 5. No, I can definitely explain like I'm 5. I think I explained everything like I'm 5, but can I explain like you're 5? We'll see. When you operate in the world of borrowing money, credit cards, mortgages, student loans, there is essentially a permanent record of you that's kept. And the analogy I'm going to make is this is like getting a grade in school. And you're just like you have a permanent record in school, and if you do something bad, it's on your permanent record. You have a permanent borrowing record. And this record keeps things like your credit accounts, your balances, your payment history, how many times you've had credit inquiries, like applied for new loans, public records, things like bankruptcies, judgments, and collections. And it's just in this like huge, massive list. And it's called your credit report. And it's kept on all of us that essentially have a social security number in the US. And it's like this big, it's actually free. You can pull up your credit report for free by law at annualcreditreport.com. This is not a plug. There is no plug. It's a free government website that is not to be confused with other ones, but you should never pay for your credit report. It's basically this big, gigantic list of all this stuff about you. And back in the day, in like the mid 50s, when lenders like banks were lending money, it was a kind of a chaotic experience. Someone would walk in, they wouldn't know this person. They'd try to analyze them and say, "Are you good or are you bad?" And we kind of already broke the topic of race this episode, and you can imagine some people who had different color skin, some bankers maybe didn't think they were as good of borrowers. And so the concept of a grade, a score, was applied by basically processing all this information in your credit report and looking at 5 topics to give you a number score between 300 and 850. Why 300 and 850? I have no idea, actually. Maybe I should have looked up this episode, but it's like these silly arbitrary numbers. I think it should be between like 0 and 100. And so if you have 850, that's like you're the best, like theoretical best human borrower, and 300, that's like you're the worst borrower. It was designed to give banks an easy, fast, less subjective way to identify what's going to make them the most money, i.e., is this person going to pay back the loan or not? That's what a credit score is. And it looks at these 5 things. Number 1, 35% of your credit score is made up of your payment history. Basically, have you made your payments on time in the past? That's 35%, the biggest amount. 30% is your amounts owed or your credit utilization. So for example, if you have 3 credit cards with $1,000 limit each for a total of $3,000 of available credit, and you're maxed out on all of them, that's going to hurt your score. If you have $3,000 of debt and a $30,000 credit limit, your utilization isn't 100%, it's at 10%. That's going to be much better for your credit score. That's your amounts owed. The third one is 15% is the length of your credit history. If you're 18 and you've had a credit card for 2 months, that's going to hurt your score. If you're 50 and you've had a credit card for 30 years, that's going to help your score. 10% is credit mix. That's basically the different types of loans you have. If you only have one credit card, that's all you've ever had, you've never had any other loan, that's going to hurt your score. If you have a credit card and an auto loan and a student loan and a mortgage, and you've been like merrily paying these back on time the entire time, that's going to help your score. And the final one is new credit or new credit inquiries. Basically, in the past recent history, the last month or few months, have you gotten a bunch of new credit? That's going to hurt your score. Basically, that's saying if you got 7 new credit cards all at once and you're about to like dramatically change your, historical behavior, that's going to hurt your score. And so it's just those basically processing that big credit report, your permanent record, to give you a grade just like you get in school, an A through an F, or in this case, an 850 through a 300, just to give banks a number. That's what it is, why it exists. My opinion on credit scores is it's really a tool for banks to be more profitable. It's not a tool for you. The only reason it exists is to make banks' lives easier and faster and make it more profitable. I guess there's an argument for it to be less subjective, which I think is good for consumers. But if you're not focused on borrowing money, if you're not getting loans, a credit score means almost nothing to you. And I think because we are conditioned as students our whole lives, our whole formative years, to get good grades, when we grow up and realize these big government and financial entities have given us a grade, we just get obsessed with it and say, okay, I need
Right.
to get a good grade. But it doesn't matter if you're not borrowing money. And it only matters a little bit when you are borrowing money. If you have like a terrible credit score because you never pay back all your loans, that's going to be a problem. People aren't going to want to give you money. But if you have like a 760 or 780 or an 800 or a 750, you know, if it's in the good to great range, that probably isn't going to matter much, if at all. You know, my own personal story is I have rarely borrowed money in my life. I didn't have student loans. I was very fortunate to have an athletic scholarship and help from my parents to get me through college. I don't borrow money for cars. I didn't own a home until I was 38. And when I did buy a home, I paid for it in cash with no mortgage. And so my credit mix portion of my credit score is very bad. It's like a couple of credit cards that I've had for a long time. That's it. But the rest of it's very good because I have high limits on my credit cards and I don't carry a balance. I pay it off in full every single month, never ever carry any ongoing balance. So I owe very little. I have great payment history. I have a long credit history and I have very few credit inquiries. So the other 90%, everything but the credit mix is very good. And my credit score was hovering around, 780 or 790. I finally did get a mortgage about a year ago. And that actually helped my credit score, even though now I owe $500,000. Now lenders like me more because I'm a better borrower or whatever. And so now my credit score, I think, is around low 800s, like 802 or 805 or something. And it will probably slowly improve as that mortgage ages as well. And guess what? Even though that was my very simple strategy, I always keep my oldest credit card that doesn't have a annual fee. And then my newest credit card, I just use whatever one I like that has good points or whatever. I don't really get too obsessed with it. Like those two credit cards, pay them off in full every month. And then every once in a while, I'll request a credit limit increase to have my utilization percent be as low as possible. That's my whole strategy. And I had, an excellent score and had no credit problems ever. There are some people will say, oh, there's lots of things you need a credit score outside of borrowing money. There are maybe a few. There are things like insurance, renting, employment, security clearances that might be able to look at your credit score, maybe not. But still, if it's like, as long as it's not like 400 or 500, like you've been like recklessly stealing money from banks and not paying it back, you're going to be fine. And so my general advice is don't be obsessed with your credit score. Just do the simple things, pay your loans back on time. I would be obsessed with your net worth score. Basically, how much money do you have? All the money you own minus all the money you owe. And the less money you owe, the higher your net worth because you don't owe people as much money. And so if you focus on that, that's what actually being rich is. And so spooky, Jen, is it spooky enough for Halloween?
You made it less spooky, so it's not quite so scary anymore. And you did a really good job of breaking it down. 5, I don't know, but good job. And one thing I noticed about credit cards in your statement is that it'll tell you how long it takes to pay off a credit card. Credit cards, I think, are very predatory in general.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
And I don't know when this law came about, but that's why these laws are important because they'll tell you how long it'll take you to pay off if you pay off only the minimum, and it'll be like 20 something years if you're paying like the $200 a month or whatever it may be, because they'll let you pay $200 a month and just let you keep owing forever and ever. And I think that those confusing aspects of having a credit card, they feed into your credit score. And also, even when you broke down the mix of what actually contributes to your credit score, I don't know how many people actually know that. So they might just be making silly mistakes. And even you breaking down your credit score, why would you not have a perfect credit score? I guess you said credit mix, but it feels like you are somebody who should have a perfect credit score, but you don't. So that kind of can tell you that a millionaire who's always paid off everything in full and hasn't really owed anything doesn't have an 850. It can give you a little bit of insight of how predatory that score is,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And you're right. It encourages people, just like you said, credit card companies love if you make the minimum payment and just pay them that 20% interest forever. My rule with credit cards is if you don't treat it like a debit card where you pay it off in full 100% every month, cut it up.
Yeah.
It's so dangerous to balloon. We talk about the power of compound growth. If you can get 10% per year on your investments over time, you can become a multimillionaire. It's wild. And then if you can get 11%, when you start playing with these investment calculators and you go from 10% to 11% to 12%, it gets wild. 1% better returns. like dramatically gives you more money. And so then you think about owing money, and you're not paying 5% or 6% or 10%. You're paying like 22.9% or 29.9%. Like they're just bananas numbers. And so I'd say like the worst thing you can do in the personal finance world is not pay your credit card bill off in full. That is like, you are in crippling danger if you're in that territory. And that's like your number one priority is like crush that credit card debt, do anything you can, like beg, borrow, not steal. I probably shouldn't be committing crimes here, but, work overtime, sell stuff, whatever it is, get out of that credit card debt, because that is like a devastating financial position to be in, to try to be clawing yourself out of this negative 29% interest. And like you said, if you're paying the minimum, that's like a 20-year debt sentence.
I'm like $5,000, $10,000. It's crazy.
Right. Assuming you never put another charge in your card, right? Like, and that's not how real life works. Real life works like this out of control ballooning of it. And so you really want to get back into the pay off in full 100% every month, or cut them up and just live, a cash debit card life.
Yeah. All right, cool. You hear that, 5-year-olds? Pay it off.
Yeah, hear that, 5-year-olds? Get out, leave kindergarten, come learn about your credit scores. Your parents will be very happy.
Exactly. Okay, shall we move on to our next segment?
Let's do it.
Money.
Can I ask a dumb one? Okay, everybody's getting really good at making nice, succinct statements every week. So this one comes from Ben. Ben asks, not sure if you have read Bill Perkins' Die with Zero or not, but my wife and I were inspired to plan to give the majority of our inheritance to our children, now 1 and 3 years old, when they are around 30 years old, as it will be most useful to them at this point in their lives. What type of account or giving method would be most tax efficient for giving them a large sum of money all at once? Jeremy?
Love this question. Have read Die with Zero. Also love that book. The basic premise of that book is, in addition to this amazing mathematical power of compound growth that gets better with time, a human's life and their health kind of decays with time. And so don't forget to balance those things. While it's good to save and compound for decades, don't wait till you're 80 to have some fun, because you might not want to go skydiving when you're 80, but you might when you're 40 or whatever it is. And he also translates that to inheritances. Most inheritances kind of bounce from like people in their 80s to people in their 60s. And so you die in your 80s and you get it when you're 60s. And then so it bounces through the generations. And, people in their 60s kind of aren't starting families and buying their first home and, trying to take a family vacation with their young kids and these like really important, meaningful moves in their life. And so Ben very astutely says, hey, I've taken that lesson to heart. I'm not going to wait till I die. I'm going to give it away when my kids are 30, when they are in that like very formative young adult family growth, home purchase period of their life, which I love. Love it, Ben. So you're crushing. Okay, so I have good news and bad news, Ben. The good news is, what a lot of people worry about with this question is the gift tax. Oh, if I give a bunch of money to my kids, I'm going to get hit with the gift tax. And I asked you this before, Jen. I'm going to see if you know the answer, because it's the second time on this podcast I'm asking this. I think you got it right last time, though.
Halloween episode, spooky.
There is, I know, spooky. I'm like going to ask you again. There's a certain amount of money under which you can gift and pay zero tax on that amount of money. And it's a lifetime exemption, so it's cumulative over the time of over the portion of your life. And so whether you gift it while you're alive, or it's transfers as part of your estate after you die, how much money can you give to your kids or your beneficiaries and pay $0 in tax on it?
And this is different from the 13 million that we talked about?
No, it is the 13 million.
It is. So I nailed it.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's 13.99 million, so you're only off by $990,000. But what's $1 million between friends? But the point is, it's about $14 million this year in 2025. Next year and beyond, it goes to $15 million. And so by the time you're listening to this, it might be 2026. And that's for one person. If you're a married couple, you can double it. So it's actually $30 million. And so basically, to Ben, you can give your kids literally, because it'll be beyond 2026. We can't count on that because we don't know what the future is going to hold, but if that's going to change. But as of 2026 tax law, You can give your kids $30 million in cash. Like if you have $30 million in cash in your checking account, you can transfer it to their checking account with a one wire transfer, file a form with the government that says, I just gift my kids $30 million and say, good for you, $0 in tax owed.
Wow.
If you're above that, you're not listening to the wrong podcast. You should be donating to this podcast and be a benefactor, not a question asker. Okay, so that's the good news, is that you very likely don't have to worry about the gift tax because it's a large amount of money. But what you might be asking is, okay, I'm going to use the amazing power of compound growth and investing from the time my kids are 1 and 3 years old until the time they're 30, about 30 years for the sake of round numbers. What about taxing that? And so just to give you an example, if you invest $500 a month, put it into a regular old brokerage account for your kids, and you get a 10% rate of return, in 30 years, that $500 a month will grow to about $1.13 million, which is the amazing part of investing. You've turned your $500 a month into $1 million. Of that 1.13 million, $180,000 are contributions. That's your $500 times 12 months in the year times 30 years. That adds up to $180,000. That isn't taxed. That's already been taxed as income. You paid income tax and you earned that $500. You can take that $180,000, give it right to your kids, no tax. But that represents growth too. There's growth in that, which is $950,000. So most of that 1.13 million is the growth, $950,000.
Right.
And on that, like let's say the day they turn 30, you sell it all, you click sell on fidelity.com and you realize the gain of all $950,000, you would pay capital gains tax on that, somewhere between 0, 10, 15, or 20% federally, and maybe for your state too, depending. And so like, let's say you pay 20% tax on that, that's $190,000 owed in tax. That means this $1.13 million that's grown is actually going to shrink to $940,000 after you pay the tax. It hurts a little bit because we went over the gap of the 7 to 6 figures, but
Right.
1.1 million and 0.94 million are both about $1 million. And so it's not crippling. Your kids are still going to get a lot of money. And so if you're asking, how do I avoid that? There's only one really good way. And unfortunately for you, the good way to avoid that is to die. If you, I know, spooky, Halloween.
Very Halloween-y.
If you die, your kids enjoy a step-up basis, which means instead of their basis being that $180,000 that you contributed, their basis becomes the 1.13. That means the day you die and the estate transfers, they can click sell on Fidelity and get 1.13 million and owe $0 in tax. The problem is, if you want to do what you're saying and give it to them while they're alive, you're going to pay that capital gains, or they are. You can gift them, you can transfer the stock or the index fund directly to them, but then when they sell, they're going to pay the capital gains. And so my general answer, and a lot of times people ask these questions, they're saying, hey, I'm a new doctor, I make $500,000 a year. What do I do to pay no income tax? And the answer is, you're going to pay income tax.
Yeah.
Like that's, the government's going to make their money. There's things you can, there's little things they can contribute to a 401k to limit it, but that's a different question. But in this case, the answer is you're probably going to pay capital gains tax because you can't just magically get all this money. There are a few things you can do. You could put money into a 529, pay for their college, and that's essentially works like a Roth where it's tax-free. You could potentially experiment with an UGMA or an UTMA, which is a custodial brokerage account where you're basically putting all the money into your kid's name now, and then you're the custodian of it, which basically can take advantage of a slightly lower tax bracket because they're kids and don't have any income. But there's some nuances there too, where they would get the money not at 30, but they get the money at 18 or 21, depending on the state you're in, and they would still owe the capital gains tax on that as well too. So basically, my answer to you is good news. Don't worry about the gift tax. It probably won't impact you. If it does, please send donations this way. And two, you're probably going to be on the hook for some capital gains if you have a ton of growth over these years.
Yeah, if your kids turn 30 and 33, if that 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, so the 1-year-old's a doctor, the 3-year-old's a lawyer, you can be like, yeah, maybe I'll wait a little bit longer. They're fine for now. They don't need this money at 30. You know what I mean? Depending on your kid's situation.
And, in that moment, you said, I want to give them a big lump sum at 30. You can maybe decide, you're like, I can maybe stretch this out and wait till a low tax year, yada, yada, yada. So there's some games you can play in that moment. But, the question, the way you formed it is if you're going to sell everything and give them write them a big check on that day, you're going to pay some capital gains tax.
Okay. Thank you, Ben, for your question. Hope that answered it. And we'll move on to our next segment. Scroll Patrol.
Scroll Patrol.
All right, Jeremy, go ahead and click on that link and let's get your reaction to this video. We're actually starting to get videos in from people on Instagram. So if you have a Scroll Patrol video or financial advice video that you want us to review, good, bad, in between, send it to my DMs, Jeremy's DMs, podcast@personalfinanceclub.com, and we'll review it.
And as always, I have not seen this at all. This is my true, authentic, honest reaction. Jen chooses this ahead of time, and I'm clicking on it right now.
I believe investing in an index fund is like buying that fruit bundle at the grocery store that might appear cheaper, but in the middle of it, you might have a bunch of moldy, old, and spoiled fruit. Investing in individual assets will give you your control back. You can pick the fruit that appears the most delicious to you. And besides that, most index funds' growth is driven by a handful of companies in them. So my question is, why not just invest directly into those companies instead of blindly following an index that tracks the value of all of these companies that you may or may not even be aware of? By investing in an individual asset, you actually become a shareholder of that company. You can allocate how much you individually want to invest in that company, and you get other benefits like dividend payments. That way you can support the companies that you actually truly love, and you won't accidentally invest in a company that completely goes against your moral values that may be hidden somewhere inside that index.
I hate this.
Are you crying, Jeremy?
I think it's from allergies, and I'm partially from this video. So, I think my
I hate the
least
music,
favorite...
first of all. I want to start there. I hate the music.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on with that.
And what is she? Is she like dancing around a...
Hopefully we don't get booted off of
something?
YouTube for this elevator music, but
awful. Hopefully it's royalty free. We'll see. But yeah, so my least favorite type of videos are these ones that are based in truth, which this one is, and then come to this completely wrong conclusion because it's likely to trick people, right? And so what she's saying is she kind of understands index funds mostly correctly, which is, yeah, it's a basket of stocks and you buy them in proportion to their size, and the growth has been driven by the biggest companies. And I'll also give her credit for saying, yeah, there might be companies that don't align with your moral values, which I think is maybe the one point that I actually agree with of hers. But one thing that's very factually wrong is she said if you invest individually, you get dividends. If you buy an index fund, you get all the dividends from all those companies. You absolutely get dividends with an index fund. And so, for example, if you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you could buy 7 of the stocks you like and get dividends from those stocks, or you could buy all 500 in an S&P 500 index fund, and you get the added up dividends from all those different stocks. But her main point here is really that you're buying bad companies and you should just buy the good ones. And the problem with that is it's just not true. For example, if I went back to the year 2000 and bought an index fund, the biggest companies that were the best companies in the fund would be companies like AT&T, IBM, ExxonMobil, General Electric. These are the companies that drove the amazing growth of the 90s, right? Are those the companies you should have been buying back then? If she made this video in 1999, she would basically say, why would you buy the bad companies when you could buy General Electric, when you could buy IBM? And, those stocks are still in the index. They're still companies doing fine, but it means you wouldn't be buying NVIDIA. You wouldn't be buying Tesla. You wouldn't be buying Netflix. You'd be buying Blockbuster, not Netflix, right? And so
Blockbuster.
It's totally true, right? Because Blockbuster was crushing in 99.
They were.
But that's the beauty of the index fund is, as Jack Bogle says, don't look for the needle in the haystack, buy the haystack. If we could just buy the biggest companies, you could if you wanted, but then you're missing the growth of the future, right? And the index fund guarantees that. And so it's just, and study after study after study have looked at that, and individual investors, experts, mutual fund managers, hedge fund managers can't individually pick stock and predictively beat the market over time. A few occasionally do, in my opinion, and based on those studies. It's just luck, not skill, as anyone's likely to get lucky, or if someone's guaranteed to get lucky if everyone's just doing it randomly.
Right.
But it's like skillful trader versus skillful trader. They're all battling it out, charging fees, and they all are going to underperform the index. So yeah, I rate these on an A to an F. I give this one like a D plus. It's not I know it's not a failing, but just it's my least favorite type of video because it sounds like this really clever conclusion, but it's just the absolute wrong conclusion, and it's like based in a generally correct understanding of index funds, which I think is going to potentially push people the wrong direction.
Do you think she's trying to sell us something? Like maybe she has a course on how to pick the best stocks or something like that? I didn't do a deep dive on her Instagram or anything.
I don't know who this is, but
yeah.
A lot of times if you're Hank Green, who I love, who is not a finance guy, he just made a video about investing, and he says in it, which I say too, which is if you talk to someone who knows what they're talking about and isn't trying to sell you something, they're going to tell you to buy an index fund because they only have truth and your interest at heart. If someone is saying your 401k is a scam or index funds are dumb, there's probably something they're trying to sell you. And so I don't know this person, but I would virtually guarantee she has some agenda for trashing index funds, or she could just be, just mistaken and making a video about it, which is possible too.
Wow. Is that Hank Green video long form? If it's a short, I might watch it.
It is long. It's about 20 minutes.
20 minutes in 2025.
I know. Who's got time for that? Give me the 3-second version. He says, buy index funds. That's
it. Okay, awesome. Okay, let's get into our last segment of the episode. Money. Jeremy had time today. Okay, so I dug back into the archives for this one, into our Instagram. When you made a post about the cost of owning, which is a hot topic on the PFC page. Do you want to describe the post that you made for the people listening?
Yes. It says cost of owning, and then it's a little conversation. The first guy says, owning a home is great because your mortgage never goes up. And then the girl says, true, but maintenance can be expensive. And he says, nah, I had $0 maintenance costs 11 out of 12 months last year. And then below that, the girl is kind of showing him a bar chart that shows 11 out of 12 months, zero mortgage costs. And then in August, it says new roof, $29,000. And I do think this is how a lot of people view homeownership, which is like, oh, maintenance isn't bad. I didn't do anything this month. But then you do a bathroom remodel, it costs $20,000, and you amortize that over the time you live there. And you're like, oh, your bathroom remodel was actually costing you $600 a month or whatever it is. And you add that to the roof, and you add that to the driveway and the mold. I just got a DM yesterday. Someone says, how do I pay for $100,000 of mold remediation in my house? I was like, oh man, that's brutal. I was like, I got to get another quote to start, but you're probably just going to have to pay it. So what was the comment?
Okay, we'll circle back to a roof costing $29,000 because if so, I'm going to keep renting. The comment says, do you think landlords pay for maintenance out of their own wallet? No. Mortgage, tax, insurance, maintenance, etc. gets bundled into a neat little package called rent.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like all these things are always like, yeah, that's kind of true. But a few things. One, rent isn't all those things added up plus profit. Rent is whatever the market will bear. And if you can't rent out your place for more than all of your expenses, then you're going to take out a loss, right? Obviously, I'd say most landlords do turn a profit, which is why they're landlords. But just because all your expenses add up to something, it doesn't mean rent is guaranteed to be more. In fact, a lot of times, renting can be a lot cheaper if there's these large expenses that you don't have to bear. So that's one. Two is that I think a lot of people think about this in a vacuum. They say, okay, I'm buying this house in the middle of this plot of land, and it's this exact house, it's this exact square footage, it's this exact everything. And if I rent it, it'll be X dollars. And if I buy it, it'll be Y dollars. And because the business of landlording as an aggregate has to be profitable for it to exist, renting must be more expensive than buying. The problem is, these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. You haven't ever owned a home, have you, Jen?
I have not.
Welcome to California in your 30s, one of these days. But what when I ask homeowners this question, I say, describe to me the last place you rented, They'll say, oh, it's a 2-bedroom apartment in a 16-unit building. It, is kind of like slightly dated, yada, yada, yada. And then I say, explain to me the home you bought. They're like, oh, it's a 4-bed, 3-bath, a single family home on a nicer area, yada, yada, yada. And so that's not the same, right? And what happens is people who go from renting to buying go from this inexpensive experience that has economies of scale, things like shared walls, shared land, lower utilities, that even though there's a profit built in for the landlord, your cost is much lower than the cost of living in a home where you have all 4 walls and more land and all the utilities and all the maintenance, yada, yada, yada. And so it's not an apples to apples comparison, right? People often will rent very frugally and buy very lavishly, thus ratcheting up these maintenance costs, insurance costs, property tax costs, realtor costs, all these things that would be much more. And so where people often go wrong is they'll say, okay, my rent is $2,000 a month. When I go do a mortgage calculator online, I can see at a $2,000 mortgage, I can buy this much home. I'm going to go buy it. But then all those costs stack up on top of it. And I actually liked how this commenter said, all these costs are bundled into a neat little package called rent. That's true. And I actually think that's a benefit because maintenance, taxes, insurance, realtor fees, opportunity cost of your down payment going into home, all that stuff is packaged into one payment called rent. And then you can take all of your other money and do whatever you want with it. What happens is people become house poor, where they take their $2,000 rent payment, get into a $2,000 mortgage, and then they pay for the roof, and then they pay for the remodel, and then they pay property tax, and then they pay property insurance, and then they pay realtor fees. And then they're like, oh man, like my total cost of ownership, including the down payment on top of that, is maybe more like $4,000 a month. And if you could rent a place for $4,000 a month, you could have rented a mansion for that or whatever, right? So, don't hate this commenter. If you really want to find some Jeremy had time today material, go look at my rent versus buy post, because people get very upset about this. But my general advice is, I'm not a ownership hater. I think people, whenever I even mention that there's an option, they think I hate home ownership. I don't. I say, maybe rent, maybe buy, go into it with your eyes wide open, look at the total cost of ownership, not just the mortgage payment. And what's most important is living below your means. Owning frugally is a much better option than renting lavishly. And I'd say renting frugally is a much better option than owning lavishly. And so, do what's right for your life, but live below your means. Don't be house poor.
Either way, let's be frugal.
Yeah.
Man, I just want a mansion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just in rural Texas. You can rent literal mansions by California standards. They're $14.99 a month for rent, like everything included. Like your 4 bedrooms. Yeah.
If I want to own a home, I'm going to go back to North Carolina.
Yeah,
run
LA,
that through. You're not
run
getting
that through
anything
your LA price meter.
Please, peanuts. Okay. All right. Should we read a little quick review?
Let's do it.
Okay. This is from Sam, who commented on our Spotify. He says, it's a great course. Got me started with investing when before I was always too overwhelmed to take the first step. So thanks, Sam, for commenting and listening to episode 3. Hopefully you enjoy this Halloween episode. That's all the time we have today for you on the Personal Finance Club show. We hope to see you next week.
And don't forget to follow the 2 rules of Personal Finance Club. Rule number 1, live below your means. And rule number 2, invest early and often.
The Personal Finance Club show is produced by Jeremy Schneider and Jen Mundia. Music by Esabalu and Homie. Send your questions to podcast@personalfinanceclub.com. The Personal Finance Club show is co-hosted by Jeremy Schneider, who is a co-owner of Nectarine, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The views expressed on this show are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Nectarine. Please refer to hellonectarine.com for all relevant disclosures. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as personalized investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any security. Listeners should consult their own financial, legal, or tax professionals for advice specific to their situation.